So I'm delighted to be here. I've recently started working with the UVU Alumni Board, so I spend quite a bit of time on campus. I'm also on the Dean of the College of Aviation and Public Safety's Executive Advisory Council. So I'm spending a lot of time at UVU lately, and I'm really enjoying it. And it's exciting to be here with you today. So I want to talk to you today about something we've been researching for years, and that is you. We've been researching you guys for about 7 years, and I want to share with you some of the things we found. Now, there might be some things I say that might make you angry. That's okay. I'm not worried. I've done this before. And if that's the case, raise your hand and tell me that you totally disagree with me. You think it's the dumbest idea you've ever heard. And I'll take a moment to share with you some of the experiences that we've had that I think validate what we're talking about. So, as an organization, we've been working on change. We help corporations all over the world deal with large changes, implementing new technology, merging, changing their product lineups. We're doing a big project with Bloomberg right now. You might recognize that name. And it's a 3-year project with them working on improving their ability as an organization to change. Well, one of the biggest changes taking place in the world is your generation entering the workplace. And I'm going to give you some data and some information that substantiates that. So, get my slides going the right way here. Our company name is Red Tree. We've been around for about 10 years. And people ask if you want to know where Red Tree came from, we'll talk later. I'm not going to take time to do that. We spent years working with the book Who Moved My Cheese? It's the best-selling business book in the world. If you haven't read it, it's a great little read. It's sold more copies than any other business book you've read or heard of. 24 million legitimate copies, and if you include sales in countries that don't always sell things legally, it's north of 40 million copies of this book have been sold or are in use. We've got some other products and things we work with there. We've worked with a few companies you might recognize. This is just a short list, just so you can see some of the places where we've used our ideas to help individuals and organizations be more successful. Again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on that because my time today with you is pretty short, and I'm pretty excited to talk about some of the things that we've researched and that we're doing in the workplace. So let me tell you where we're headed today. We're going to define what's a millennial. Most of you probably know. If you don't, we'll make sure we've got a clear definition. We're going to look at what's the big deal. Why is our generation getting all of this attention? No other generation before has. What's the big deal? And we're going to look at some roadblocks that you face. And you may be aware of some of them. You may have read about some of them. And some of them may surprise you. What we find is that as you look at all of them, there are one or two that are helpful for each one of us to work on. So I want to share some of those things with you today. All right, so who can tell me what is a millennial? What's the answer to this question? I'm going to go ahead and let you answer.
It's the name for the most recent generation that's graduating high school.
Okay, graduating high school all the way up to the age of 30. It's almost a 20-year gap, 20-year period of time. Okay, what else makes up this group that we call millennials? Why are they grouped together? Why is this 20-year period of time grouped together and called millennials? Any ideas? Yeah?
So I think that I read somewhere that it went like the baby boomers that boomed, and then it went Generation X that kind of was like in a recession like of numbers of who was born. And then, I don't know if Generation Y and a millennial, they kind of like leaped into each other, but then there was another kind of boost in population.
Okay, good. You've got some great names there for each of the generations. I'll touch a little bit more on that. So, millennials, there's a lot of names for this group, and it depends on which organization you're looking at to see how they're grouping people together. But we use U.S. Census data. That's probably the most globally recognized. And millennials and Gen Y are the two most common names, and there are a bunch of other names tied to your generation. The second greatest generation, I have no idea about the second greatest generation. Weird name to show up, but there are some strange ones here. But that's what we're talking about in terms of age range. So here's what makes up a generation. Here's what they look at when they're trying to group together and make a generation. They'll look at things like technology, pop culture, today movies, if there were wars or natural disasters. And they look at saying, well, which people during their formative years, age 16 to 25, had a similar set of influences? And that similar set of influences then starts to create some cohesion, or that group coming together. So is everything about a generation consistent for every single person? No, not at all. But there are some generalizations that prove to be disturbingly accurate over and over and over again. And that's kind of what I want to share with you today. So your generation has the most diverse family backgrounds of any previous generation. Traditional families, all sorts of non-traditional families, lots of single parents. That is extremely common and part of what makes your generation unique. 3 in 5 have a working mom. 1 in 6 have a single parent. You've grown up where teamwork has been emphasized tremendously. Okay? So all of this is just a little background for you to say, okay, I know what we're talking about. So we've been researching your generation for the last 7 years. We've interviewed managers and workers across the country by the thousands. And what we were looking for was to identify which managers were being successful helping younger employees get into the workplace. Which ones were helping you guys be as successful as possible. And believe it or not, some of the managers were terrible. They were bad. And some of them were great. And so what we did is we started to look at why that was the case. We looked at that for managers, and we also looked at what's going on with your generation that's making it perhaps a little different than previous generations. All of that's been captured for managers in this book on the left that we published in 2010. And in 2014, just the end of next month, the end of March, my co-authors and I will be publishing this book here called Millennials at Work. 7 skills every 20-something needs to achieve greatness at work. And I'll touch on some of these ideas today. So let's talk about an interesting idea. Who can define what is a personal value? We always use this word values. We toss it around. I have all these are my values. What is a value?
A personal code of conduct.
Okay, personal code of conduct. What else would you add to that? Anything else you'd add? Yeah.
It's something you base all like your decisions and actions upon.
You know, that's interesting. So it is a personal code of conduct, and it starts to influence choices and decisions you make. Do we all have the same values? No. Interestingly enough, generationally, if you look across the whole world, previous generations in the United States versus Russia versus China versus Brazil, those generations had different values in each of those countries. Yours is the very first generation where the top 4 to 10 values are consistent globally. Immediate, optimistic, digital natives, and family-centric. So 3 out of the 6 out of the 10 line up in almost every country across the world. So why would that be? Why would you guys, as a generation, have a consistent set of values globally? What do you think is causing that?
I'd say social media.
Social media is a very large factor. What else? There are some others. What else? What are some other reasons that values would be consistent globally for your generation?
Transportation is much more accessible.
Yeah, the ability to be in different places around the world is very different than it was. Yeah, go ahead.
Kind of go with transportation, like natural disasters, like in Haiti and Philippines, like they all kind of, like we send aid and they send aid to us. It's kind of like we're all one unit.
More of a global community. Okay. What else? Yeah.
I think there's a lot of access to information, so we're more educated about around the globe and what other people think and feel.
That's right. So if something's happening in Egypt where they're voting on a new constitution and they're getting ready to vote for, that's not news that you might get in a once-a-month newspaper. It's something you see on the news tonight. And that's different than it's been. Go ahead.
Well, and the information, no matter where you're from, it all comes from the same source. Whatever Google decides that we're going to read is what everyone ends up reading, no matter where you are in the world.
Ah, the all-wise Google. Got it. Okay. Yep. I'm with you. So you can see there are some reasons that globally you as a group have the same values far more consistently than any previous generation. Here's another interesting thing about those values. Your generation behaves more consistently with your values than any other generation. Let me say that again. Your generation behaves more consistently with your values than any other generation. And that shows up in every facet of your life because you behave very consistently with what matters to you. An older generation, like a baby boomer, somebody born in the early 40s through the early 60s, they may not have lived in accordance with their values because they show up and they work for the same company for 15 years or 20 years or their whole career. No matter what the organization's doing, they suppress some of their personal values because of their allegiance to the organization. That's what you do, right? Your generation's different. And that's a great thing. That is something to be admired. I think every other generation probably wishes like crazy that they followed their values as well as your generation does. Does that make any sense? Anybody need to have any clarification on that idea? Okay, that's a big idea. That's part of the foundation of what makes your group so different. So let's keep talking here. And look, here are some of the ways those values show up. Half of millennials would rather have no job than a job they hate. How many people agree with that statement? I would rather have no job than a job I just hate. So about half the room, okay. 1 out of 4 millennials say they're satisfied with their current job. 25% say they're satisfied with their job. I talked to a lot of you guys. That's very true. Do you have a comment?
No, I'm just chilling.
Oh, just chilling. Okay. I thought you were going, listen, I want to fight with you on that. Okay. 9 out of 10 millennials think they deserve their dream job. Anybody? Yep. Think you deserve your dream job? Yep. About 9 out of 10, 90%. Right? If I had an older group of people in the room, they would not answer these questions the same way. Just basic, simple questions. So here are some strengths that you guys bring to school, to your life, and to the workplace. You're the most well-educated generation in history. That's not a surprise. Most technical. Yep, question over here.
Can I ask how that was measured?
How this was measured in terms of education?
Yeah, because our generation has such access to instantaneous information. Is this information, how is that measured? Is it measured on like a standardized test, or is it like, hey, can you tell me what on the street this was?
No, it's just talking about access to formal education. Okay. And it was measured that way. That's what it was looking at. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Go ahead and jump in if you have questions. All right. So you're the most technologically savvy. That probably goes without saying. That's probably pretty obvious. Socially responsible. Interestingly enough, your generation volunteers to give back to community more than any generation. Your generation cares if the company where you work has some type of program for giving back. And if it doesn't, that matters to you. It can violate a value. You would not take a job, some of you, at organizations that don't have some kind of social program for giving back and building the community or building people. You're highly innovative. Throughout your whole growing up, you've been put in teams where it's fostered collaboration, creativity, and imagination. And the minute you hit the workplace, you want to share all of those ideas. I'm going to tell you a story towards the end about that, where it kind of backfired, but has some value, something to learn from it. And last but not least, when you see purpose in what you're doing, when it has meaning for you, you'll work as hard or harder than any other generation in history. Now, the opposite of that's true. If it doesn't have meaning, you may not find very much interest in it. It may not capture your attention, and you probably won't invest a ton of energy in it. Are those ideas kind of resonating with you? This means yes? This means no? Okay, perfect. All right. So what's the big deal here? It's not a small deal. You might think, hey, this is just not that big a deal. Let me show you some information as to why. For starters, your generation is gigantic. Let me see if I can get to come up here. So builders were about 58 million, boomers about 78 million, Gen X 38, millennials 82 million. You're huge, collectively. Sorry. You're huge. So baby boomers are getting ready to retire. Over the next 15 years, they'll be gone. There's only 35 million left in the workplace. They'll be gone. They have 30 plus years of experience. And you're thinking, good, get rid of them. They don't know what they're talking about. That wasn't a joke. So, baby boomers are retiring. They hold most of the senior positions in organizations. Gen X isn't big enough to fill all of those. It's going to leave a vacuum in the wake of some of that. But it's also going to leave a knowledge vacuum. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Now here's something fascinating. Because this is a global generation, let's look at the global data. Millennials are 2.3 billion strong globally. And when you couple that with the idea that your values are more consistent globally than they've ever been before, the impact your generation is going to have on the workplace and on the world is tremendous. And we want you to be as successful as possible so that I can retire at age 55 and you can take care of me. We want you to be as successful as possible to make businesses better, to bring new technologies to bear, to create solutions, because there are some big problems in the world. And we want you to be as successful as possible doing that. That's why we've done this research, to help you get into the workplace and be as successful as possible. So here's what you look like so far in the workplace. By next year, you're going to make up about 38% of the workforce. Pretty good number already. And that number is just going to keep on growing. So I want to ask you a couple more questions here, because these are issues that businesses care about, right? You're going to go get jobs from companies. Businesses care about this. So let's talk about these two issues here. What is the word turnover in business? What does that mean? Yeah, right here in the back.
Like people leaving the company.
Yeah, people leaving the company, sometimes by retirement.
Yeah, it's like sometimes by retirement or they get fired or they don't want to do it anymore.
Yep, retirement, fired, don't want to be there, attrition, turnover. Okay, that's exactly right. Anything else to add to that? Is that a fair definition for turnover? Do you want to know something about your generation? Your generation's turnover rate in organizations is 3 to 5 times the norm. We do research on this, and we have a company where it's 10 times the norm. The one company, we did this for a group of 100 people, and their turnover with your age group was 10 to 12 times more, and over 5 years cost them $110 million in excess of what normal turnover costs. Do you think businesses care about that? That's a tremendous expense. The biggest single expense businesses deal with is people. And when turnover accelerates, it creates cost. And you're thinking, well, that's not my problem. They probably have a stupid work environment. But at the end of the day, that's where you go get employed. And so how you integrate in matters. Yeah?
What do they normally spend that money on? Like training or?
So that $110 million talks about the cost of advertising to fill the positions. It talks about, I'm going to show you a slide on this in a minute, but it talks about the cost of advertising, the actual cost of recruiting. Sometimes you pay recruiting firms. It talks about the cost of training and the opportunity cost. If you've had somebody there 6 months that suddenly knows how to do their job and they leave, then the next person takes 6 more months, so their productivity levels are at a lower as it steps in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's turnover. We're going to talk about that just briefly. What is knowledge drain? What in a business context is knowledge drain? There's a hand. Yep, back here.
Well, obviously, after you've been in a company for a specific amount of time, you obviously know and can like comprehend how the company is supposed to function in like basic and more complex organization. And so, if you leave the company, you know all that knowledge, all that information is gone, and it needs to be filled again by someone who gets that experience.
Great. What else would you add to that? Anything else about knowledge drain? You nailed it. That's almost all, that's a large portion of it. It's also called tacit knowledge. When you go to work in a company, some of what they do is documented, right? There are these procedures, you know what your steps are. That's not what we're talking about. Tacit knowledge is knowledge that's between the ears that you only know because you've worked there for a while. I'm going to share with you a couple of examples where tacit knowledge loss has gotten in the way. So I skipped a slide here. So let me talk about this turnover issue. So this is that example I was telling you about. Over a 5-year period of time, it was $110 million. Now this is some national data that talks about the cost of replacing an employee. If you replace an entry-level employee, it costs about 50% of their annual salary. So if you come out of school, you're making $45,000 a year. To replace you is about $22,500. If you're more of a mid-level manager, the cost of replacing that person is 150% of their salary. So a more expensive person we'll say 100,000, and to replace them is 150%. If you're a high-level executive, which a lot of the baby boomers are, replacing them has about a 400% cost of their salary. The highest paid worker, the highest cost of replacement, and the biggest impact on tacit knowledge loss. So you can see businesses care about you guys entering and being successful, and you should too, right? You should care about entering the workplace and being successful. So let me share 2 examples about knowledge drain. NASA, who, as you know, put somebody on the moon a few years ago, 50 or so years ago, said if we want to go to the moon again, we'll be starting from scratch because most of that knowledge about how we did it has disappeared. So you're thinking, wait a minute, don't they have all this documentation? Well, that's tacit knowledge. People that worked there that solved problems, that knowledge has been lost. Here's one, financially really painful. Boeing a couple years ago, retired about 9,000 senior employees, right? They're trying to cut some costs. That's their most expensive employee. They got this very large order for 737s and 747s, and they had to shut down production for 3 weeks because there were things that the younger employees didn't know how to do. $1.6 billion cost to shut down for 3 weeks, right? It matters. How long does it take to acquire tacit knowledge? You go to work for a company, how long before you match the tacit knowledge of an older worker? Any guesses?
Go.
Yeah.
10,000 hours?
10,000 hours. You've been reading some books about golf and other things. Good. Good. Okay. So that's talking about what it takes to become expert at what you do. And I don't know if that 10,000 hours works out. It's around 7 years. So if we've got boomers retiring, and you're coming into the workplace, and we've got this tacit knowledge transfer, now you may be thinking, you know what? Those old fogies probably were doing it the hardest way possible. I can figure it out. I'll do it faster and better. And I'm here to tell you that that's true sometimes. And a lot of the time, it leads to some really awesome disasters. We've seen it with clients. Okay? So that's why these ideas matter. They matter for your success, and they matter for the businesses that will employ you for their success. And some of your generation says, well, you know what? I don't really care about the company. I'm in it for me. Right? I'm going to take care of myself. My parents took care of their company, and look where that got them. I'm in it for me. That's nifty. If you all want to go start your own businesses, there's only a few people that start Facebook and others. You know, if you look at the data, it's pretty small. You gotta find a place to fit in and work and make a contribution. And there's lots of opportunity to do that. And you guys are going to make some of the greatest contributions in the history of the world. And we're hopeful to help you get there faster. All right. So here's what some of this knowledge drain looks like. So right now, we already saw this graph that shows 38% of the workforce globally over there. By 2015, that little number is what the global is. It's 200 million. I guess that's not a very small number. 2025, you guys will make up 47% of the workplace. And then we've got this number over here that's, again, the global number. So you can see it continues to grow clear into 2030 where the next generation starts to show up that yellow up there. But we're talking about a big shift in the workplace here that you guys are bringing. So what I want to do is talk to you about some of the roadblocks. As we went and we looked at where managers were succeeding, where they weren't succeeding, where you were succeeding coming into the workplace and where you were struggling, your generation. Keep in mind, some of the older part of the generation is almost 30. There were some very consistent points of tension. And believe it or not, there are some things that we found that the managers need to work on. Who would have thought? Managers can get better. What a crazy idea. And managers have a large portion of the responsibility to get better at their job. Well, can you control how the manager behaves when you start at work? No. The only person you have a say over is you. So let's look at the part you can do as you enter the workplace. So here's roadblock number 1. Relationships with your manager. One of the fascinating things about your generation is how you build relationships. as a rule, or generally speaking, you are great generationally at building relationships this way. What do I mean by building relationships this way? Yep. Go ahead.
I mean, laterally, like on our own level.
Yep, on your own level, laterally. So, and you have big webs of friends. You probably have 1,000 friends on Facebook, right?
Something on a superficial level. You're good at getting past the pleasantries and being nice, but not really getting in depth.
There is some of that because of the nature of the relationships. Because they're lateral, sometimes they tend to be a little more superficial. Not always, but that is a trend that exists. So, there's a reason for this. Growing up, I'm going to show you my age. Growing up, I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't even have the internet. When I wanted information, there was a book on the shelf that I pulled out called the Encyclopedia. And I had to actually look through it. Google search was me thumbing through the pages. And you know that. You know that's true. But here's what's interesting. As a result, if I needed help with something, I went to a professor. You Google it on YouTube and watch an explanatory video that might tell you how to do it. Or you Google it and you read something on it. I know because that's how I help my kids do 11th grade math homework that I can't remember how to do. I was doing trigonometry last night. It's only been 25 years. Okay, so as a result, your access to information hasn't had to go through authority figures nearly as much as my information did. You haven't had to use authority figures to gain access to information, which means you're not accustomed to reaching up to build a relationship up and down. You're accustomed to being able to get access to the information you need through lots of media and technology resources. That's not bad. What it does lack is the voice of experience. If I went and talked to my professor in college because I couldn't figure out how to do my calculus homework, and we sat down and we went through it, and I asked for a real-world example, I got experience, not just explanation on how to do it. And so sometimes that gets missed in the process. That's why building relationships with your managers is an important skill, and it's a roadblock. We see this show up as an area where, as your generation goes to work, you're not as good at that as maybe older generations because they had to build their skill set differently. Does that make you less capable? No. Does that mean some of you are terrible at this and some of you are great? Yep. So if this is one of your weaknesses, you should recognize this is something I can work on. If this is one of your strengths, give yourself a high five because I'm going to stumble across one of your weaknesses here in the next few minutes. Right? And that's okay. We all have our strengths and weaknesses. But generationally speaking, this shows up as an area there's a challenge. Now, what happens then is you show up at work, you don't want to build a relationship with your boss or you're not necessarily good at it, you need help. You tend to ask your peers. They may not know any more than you do, and you end up doing work that's not on target. We see that happen all the time. People bring work back to their boss that misses the mark in a big way. Okay? Does that make sense? Any questions about this one? Now, this is a skill deficit. In our materials, we only have 55 minutes today. In our materials, we talk about, so what are some of the things you can do to develop this skill? And there are some easy to do things that will help you build the skill. Anything else on this one about communication? Questions, ideas? Yeah.
In getting that relationship and that experience reference, some things that I personally have observed is that those authority figures sometimes don't have the most up-to-date information. And that can kind of cause a handicap in that relationship.
Yep.
A loss of credibility between the student and the teacher, for lack of better terms.
Yep. You're absolutely right. So there's not a perfect answer to this, right? We're trying to help managers get better at what they do. And we're trying to help you as a generation recognize where there's some skill development areas. And sometimes it's going to miss the mark. But building a relationship with your boss, even if you know that some of their information or their approach may be antiquated, you still need to tap into the experience component of it because there may be reasons why you feel, that's so antiquated. But it's not. You're missing the experience component that gives context for why you want to do it that way. So you got to work on that. And be smart enough, you guys are smart, be smart enough to realize, okay, I see the experience piece. I'm going to apply, the more current thinking and try and yield an even better result. Can you see how that would make you stand out rather than step back and fall behind? You leverage the relationship with the boss, you leverage your own expertise, and you bring it together. All right. Getting over a nagging cold. I'm pretty good, but I need a little water. Let's look at the next one. So the second one is missing the details. Now you're going to see the third one here in a minute and go, huh? Aren't these the exact opposite? So often what we see happening is you might think you've done a great job, only to find out that it's not what your boss wanted. The reason this happens, well, I'll tell you a story. I've got a millennial that works in my office. She's delightful, hardworking. A few weeks ago, she's new to our company. A few weeks ago, she was sitting in my office, and I said, how you doing on this? Well, blustering, a little Winnie the Pooh blustering. I said, so do you understand what you're being asked to do here? Well, I think so. So have you asked your boss about it? Well, no. I need to know how to do it. Well, why would you need to know how to do it? I just need to be able to figure it out myself. I said, so let me ask you this. Where have you been looking for information? Well, I've been Googling it. I've been talking to my peers. I've been trying to figure out what's going on. And I said, so I know the answer to what you need. It's probably going to take me about 60 seconds to explain it to you. How long have you been working on this? Oh, a couple days. She was uncomfortable coming to ask for the details because she thought she should be able to Google it. She used those words. Well, I've been trying to Google it and find out how to do it. And I've been talking to my peers. Both of which are very proactive ways of trying to solve it. I give her full credit for trying to be proactive. The problem is, if she'd come to me and asked for details, it would have taken me 60 seconds to tell her what she needed to know. Can you see the problem as a business owner that we would have with that? 16 hours, 60 seconds. I lost something there, didn't I? I paid money for something that could have been a lot more productive use of time. So learning to ask for the details. Now, part of the reason we find in the research that you don't like to ask for the details is because you think you can do it faster. Listen, I'm going to figure out a way to do this so much faster, it's going to give me some free time at work. You may be thinking, no. Let me tell you, we see it over and over again. I had a hospital call me from California, and they were trying to get nurses to follow a new procedure, and the younger workers didn't want to follow the procedures. They knew better. Well, let me tell you a few secrets in the healthcare industry. You get sued if you don't follow procedures. You kill people if you don't follow procedures. I mean, those are two pretty good reasons to listen to those that have experience. I mean, I'm just saying. So it's not always that extreme, but the point, you get the point. Learning how to ask for the details, to know where your ability to do it the way it's needed stops, and where your creativity can be brought to bear to do it maybe faster. So I'm not trying to stifle your ability to contribute. I'm trying to help you not stumble and fall on your face. I was with a company in Salt Lake. An executive, several hundred employees, said, I gave this kid this assignment. He came in. I didn't even know what it was. He had no idea what the outcome that was being delivered was because it wasn't what was needed. The details hadn't been asked for. Okay, so again, you may find these things frustrating. You may think, that's not me. Great. If you're good at all of these things, I applaud you. Number 3, missing the big picture. So this is just the opposite of the details, right? Now here's where we find this being an interesting challenge. If you don't know the big picture of how something fits in, you go back to what I said at the start. You're less interested in doing it because it doesn't have meaning for you. And that's understandable. Everybody likes to have meaning in what they're doing. You want what you're doing to make a difference. That's reasonable at any level in the organization. So, if you don't understand what the big picture is and you go off working on things, A, it can be unmotivating, and B, you're not able to contribute the value to the organization. So trying to figure out what is the big picture here. What's the context? Why am I doing this? We had a conversation at work just last week about this very topic, where we shared the big picture of what we're trying to accomplish this year. And guess what? Every one of our millennials at the end of the meeting said, that was so helpful to understand why we're doing what we're doing. Because they needed the big picture. Everybody does, but it shows up in spades for your generation because you want what you're doing to have meaning. Okay? So the first one, yeah, go ahead.
Just wondering if in your research you found that
Absolutely. And the reason for that is baby boomers showed up to work and they did what they were told. And so one of their values, if you listen here, one of their values, baby boomers, is I go to work and I do what I'm told. I work hard and I don't ask questions, right? My very first boss when I started at Dow Jones, Wall Street Journal. And he talked about showing up to work, this was 40 years ago, suit and tie every day. The person next to him was Mr. So-and-so. The person next to him over here, this was Mr. So-and-so. His boss was Mr. So-and-so. Full-on suit, Mr. and Miss. All right, there's a huge level of formality, and all he did was went in and followed the rules. Didn't matter if he knew why he was doing it. It mattered that I pay my dues. Paying your dues is a huge baby boomer thing. So how do they feel when they see entitled, really smart, really creative show up at work? Wait a minute, that's not how we do it. All right, that's how they feel. That doesn't make them right. That doesn't make you wrong. That doesn't make you wrong or right, and it doesn't make them wrong, right? Everybody's got some ownership in this. That's why managers need to improve, and you can see some things that you can do. So that does show up because it's a value conflict. One of the strongest sources of friction between individuals is value conflict. If you have a value and somebody else has a value and they're in direct conflict with each other, that's one of the biggest sources of tension. Integrity is a value. If you sense that somebody wants you to do something that compromises your integrity, you probably get pretty feisty about it, right? That's a perfect example of how value conflict is some of the foundation of this. If we had 5 hours, I'd walk you through why that value conflict exists and we could look at the values of each generation. What you should know is there is a difference in values and it creates some friction in the workplace. And these are the things that start to break down that friction and start to lubricate the nature of the business relationship. Okay, does that make sense? All right, were there any other questions about, we talked about communication, details, and big picture so far. Let me keep going. How many of you think you're really good multitaskers? Give me your hands, come on. I have millennials argue with me that they are great at this all the time. Come on, give me your show of hands. How many of you think you're great? Tell the truth. I am great at multitasking. You wake up some days and you say, I am really good at this. Too many people are scared to raise their hand. Okay. So there is a very significant generational belief that you are better at multitasking than in the previous generation. Does multitasking even exist? What does the science say? What does the science say? It says that multitasking doesn't exist. Why does it not exist? What's going on? Anybody have any ideas?
Okay, so if you're doing so many things, I think it's really good to see it this way. Like if you're doing so many things in say school, and you're trying to multitask, say like the Cal and tons of other programs and taking 20 credits and doing a job, trying to do all of these multitasking, you aren't going to be getting anything out of it. You're not going to be contributing anything because you put in 5 minutes here and then here and there. And you can't focus and get the flow.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of my favorite examples is when people do homework while watching TV.
Oh, you forgot a few things. With their instant messenger on,
Yeah, right.
and they've got some texts coming in. They're probably hanging out with the friend. Okay, keep going.
The Facebook is up.
Yep.
I openly admit that I turn into a zombie when I watch TV. I can't do it. And whenever I do watch people try and do it, what I end up seeing is that they don't catch certain things in the show, and they're like, wait, what happened?
Yeah.
And then you look at their homework assignment, and they're like, oh, I've only just started still, and it's been 2 hours.
Yep.
And they don't really end up getting anything done.
Yep. Go ahead. One last comment. I'm going to share a couple thoughts. Go ahead.
I think it just comes down to the fact that we can literally only focus on one thing at a time. So
Yeah.
when we're multitasking, we're just juggling between things. We're focusing on our homework, then looking at the music and hearing it, and then going back to the homework, and then going to the phone. But we're really not thinking about both things at once.
You're right. We're doing something called switch tasking. And I've got a game that points this out. Everybody tries to beat it, and it destroys everybody every time. But we just don't have time to play it. Here's what we know. When you're switch tasking, so if I'm sitting at my desk working, somebody interrupts me, and then I try and get back to what I was doing, there's a 30% productivity impact because of the interruption and getting back on task. Statistics go as high as 48%, but 30% is about where it is. There's a 30% loss of productivity. The second thing that happens, and this may be more than you want to know, if you look at the amount of energy your brain takes about 20% of the energy that your body creates, and your brain is built in a way that it's only handling one thing at a time. If you started to multitask, it would consume more energy. There's a great TED Talk on this. You can go watch it. It's fantastic on the amount of energy your brain takes. If you Google, it's one of the TED instruction videos, and just Google your brain and energy and it'll show up. It's really fun science, and it talks about multitasking towards the end. So, does that mean we shouldn't multitask? Absolutely not. It means that we need to understand when we should focus. There's an article on Harvard Business Review called the Focus Energy Matrix, and it talks about focused time with high energy, and it talks about purposeful results. It's a great article on the idea. It's looking at managers. But that's the idea. We need to know when are the focus times and when are the times that we allow ourselves to have distraction and interruption. One of the things your generation hasn't quite dialed in yet is the focus time, because all the interruptions, all the technology. So as you enter the workplace, managers perceive it as they're so distracted. I walk by and they're on Facebook, and then I walk by and they're tweeting, and I don't know if they're doing any work, right? Now, you're probably doing a lot of work, but because you're bouncing between things, you seem to be distracted. So this is a great topic, just knowing when to focus and demonstrating that focused work behavior. I'm pretty sure it'll help you in your schoolwork too. It's just a crazy idea, but I'm pretty sure it'll help. Okay, I'm going to keep moving here. Number 5, no real feedback. Now maybe you're great at this, but a lot of millennials, we had one millennial in our research, every time her boss tried to schedule to give her some feedback, she'd be sick, she had a dentist appointment, I'm at Starbucks, I forgot. Avoiding getting feedback at every turn. Now the reason for that shows up in the research is you're accustomed to working with coaches, friends, parents, everybody's on a first name basis. They're all right here in a lateral relationship. Even your soccer coaches haven't taken a real hierarchical relationship. And the result is you're not used to getting hierarchical feedback, which sometimes is threatening. We did a bunch of work with the Long Beach Police Department. 900 officers, 1,000 officers, 750 are millennials. Believe it or not, they have parents sending in notes, trying to excuse them for something with work, parents showing up to job interviews. I'm telling you, I was out there, I saw it, it's real. I didn't believe it at first, but it's real. And so, and when their kids would get feedback, the parents would call in and say, I don't think what you told my son was justified. That really wasn't necessary. So it's crazy, but we see it over and over in the workplace. Learning how to give and receive constructive feedback is how we get better as individuals. We don't improve unless we get feedback. That's the reason you get grades. That's the reason we keep score in sports. And that's why at work, your boss is supposed to meet with you and give you feedback. Not to say they hate you, but to say, here's how you can get better and be more successful. So this is a tricky one because most of the burden here is on the manager learning how to do a much better job giving feedback. And we train managers on that. But you should know, even if your manager is stumbling all over themselves giving feedback, you should be marching into your boss all the time saying, tell me what I can do better to get better results.
So from your research, have you found that it's like our generation's parents that have got us to that point? Because going to school, I was kind of always a self-driven person. My parents never checked my grades and always had good grades. But I would see parents come in to defend their kids for sloughing and having bad grades, and teachers would be like, whoa, why aren't you talking to your kid about this?
Yep.
Yell at me as a teacher.
Yep. Parents are the ones that raised you and taught you a lot of your values, right? So there's a lot to this. There's probably 2 hours worth of discussion on how the values developed, but that's a big part of it. And we're going to talk about that notion of accountability here in just a second. Like the next slide. So this notion of being accountable is one where, just like you're saying, your parents show up and rescue you from this. I've got my kids' friends' parents I've seen do this. rather than allowing their children to be accountable for the results they've produced and learn from it, they're protected from it. And so it creates a culture where you're not accountable. And it gets in the way, right? When you're at work, your job is to produce results. And the way you know you're successful is by producing the results and being accountable for those results. So you'll see that a lot of these ideas are tied together, right? They're all woven together and they reinforce each other. But that's what we're talking about here. I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to keep moving. There are examples of all of this that demonstrate these ideas. Let me talk about the seventh one. I am going to tell you a story about this one. So this one's contributing or misunderstanding your real value. We talk about it in terms of a skill in learning how to contribute the correct value at the correct time. So, like I said earlier, you show up to work, you're excited, you got this new job, you're fresh out of school, you're going to make a difference. And you're accustomed to having your voice heard, right? You're in a class, you're in a study group, you're accustomed to having your voice heard. And if you've got these value conflicts where baby boomers say, well, you're in the room here, but why is it that you're talking? Right? Now that doesn't sound very nice. And there are a lot of great baby boomers in the workplace. But there is a culture of that. Well, you've been here a week and we're building a missile guidance system. Why are you talking? Right? So now that doesn't mean you shouldn't talk, but it's learning how to contribute your value the right time in the right way so that it adds to it. L3 is a government contractor. They've got a big office up in Salt Lake. They've got thousands of employees globally. The CEO is based here. We've done some work with her. And there was this young engineer, Millennial, and thought that she was the stupidest person on the planet. Thought that the CEO just did not have a clue what they were doing. And sent through an email to the CEO with all the things that she could do to run the company better. So it was well-intentioned, right? The goal was to make a difference. The mechanism for doing it was probably a little ill-conceived. So the CEO walked into the COO and said, you know what, I think I'm going to fire this person. Did you see this email? And the COO said, well, what if he's right? Now that's a stroke of genius by a COO. Well, what if he's right? She said, you know what, okay, I'll meet with him. So she brought him up, she had lunch with him, and they were able to share their views. Now he learned some of the areas where he probably didn't have the right to be contributing because he didn't have the experience. And she also found the conversation very stimulating. So it's changed some of the culture. Is that the green light to go ahead and do that when you join a company? No. The point is, he hadn't figured out how to contribute the right value in the right way. Did he have great ideas? Yes. Was there probably a better way to share some of those ideas? Yes. And so that's part of learning how to integrate into the workplace. That doesn't mean your ideas should be suppressed. It means you need to learn how to operate inside an organization. Is there red tape sometimes that's really stupid? Yeah. Should you try and break some of that down? Absolutely. But you need to realize how you go about doing that has a consequence for you. Sometimes to your betterment and sometimes to your detriment. So learning how to contribute your value at the right time and in the right way is a skill development area. Okay, so, and again, does anybody know what the word hubris means there at the bottom of the slide? What does hubris mean? It's a $12 word, yeah.
Excessive pride.
Excessive pride, a little bit of arrogance, overconfidence, right? And that showed up in the research pretty consistently. That's how you're perceived. Does that mean that that's the case? No, but it's how you're perceived. And when we're dealing with a manager's perception, we're mostly dealing with what they view to be their reality, right? Okay, so here are some of the manager perceptions, just so you can see. These are direct quotes from the research. They don't care about customers. If you correct them, they will quit. They think there's always an excuse that makes being late okay. They want a trophy just for showing up. Seen it? Yep. She asked for an extended lunch to go shopping with friends the third day on the job. Right? I'm in new hire training. Hey, you know, I need to take 3 hours for lunch today. My grandma's in town. They assume it's okay to call me by my first name like we're buddies. I'm their boss. Now that's being broken down quite a bit. But it's still, if you get an older baby boomer, and remember, they're the ones with all the tacit knowledge, you want them to like you. You want them to share what they know. When I go out of my way to do something nice, they act like I owed it to them. So these are direct quotes, and we see these quotes pretty consistently. So again, this is not a beat you down. This is a, how can I help you be successful? You need to know that you're being perceived this way. And you have things you can do about it. Things that will enable you to stand out from all of your peers in the workplace and move ahead faster than they are because you've got some extra skills that they don't.
So I have a question about this in general. So I understand that as a generation we are influenced by our environment, and especially on a global scale, and that kind of creates our personalities and our dynamics and things like that. And I know that obviously we can change that a little bit, like the things that we have negative, our perceived weaknesses, we can change those. And I think it's a privilege for us to be able to learn how to change that, but obviously not everyone will learn that. Not everyone will have this presentation to learn how to change things. So it seems that no matter what, the world is forced to be a product of the generation giving up its position and the generation taking the positions over.
Yep.
And so if there was ever a time where those two generations or however many generations were at conflict, and somehow the world and technology and war made a generation that could not adapt to the world, and there was going to be this utter failure, is it possible for that adaptation to come another way? Just like aside from being informed.
Yeah. Over time, the experience will be developed again, right? A new set of tacit knowledge and experience. The question is, what's the consequence along the way? And you're right, only if we're lucky, we'll get to 5 million people globally, 10 million. That's still a small fraction. Our hope is that by doing that, though, we'll be able to make a big enough dent in how your generation enters the workforce and is in the workforce that it'll make a difference. So it's a good question, and it's looking at something that's somewhat out of our control. So good question. You shouldn't walk away from this presentation thinking, oh, we stink, because you don't. You guys are awesome. You guys are going to do amazing things as a generation entering the workplace. Like I said, our goal is to help you do it faster and more successfully because you learn some of these ideas. Let me just wrap up with a couple things here. So each one of those roadblocks translates into skills, and inside the skills we've got activities and things you can learn. Just not enough time to cover all of that today. So a roadmap of how to be successful with that. We also, right down here in the bottom right's a website, we have what we call the Workplace Readiness Assessment. This measures how you do on the 7 skills related to this and benchmarks you against your peers. It's really fascinating. Some things will show up as real strengths, and some things will show up as real areas of weakness. Now, this was a fantastic one, by the way. I've seen as low as -30 on some of these. This is probably the very best score I've ever seen produced. But we put in there, positive reinforcement. And if you're bad at one, that doesn't mean you're a disaster or you won't succeed. It means you know specifically where you can work to get better. That's the notion of feedback, right? What can I do to be better so that I can succeed? If you do that, it'll benefit your career. It'll benefit you in work. It'll benefit you in your personal life. It'll benefit you in your interactions in the community. These skills are really, really good skills to help you develop to get out of the gates with your career as well as possible. So it's a pleasure to be here with you today. This is the end of what I've got to talk about. I want you to know that we think highly of your generation. We're excited for your generation and all the changes you're going to bring to the world. And we have a lot of confidence in you. Hopefully some of these ideas will help you along your path. Thank you.